Hey, good morning. How you doing? You well? It's nice to be back with you. Wednesday morning, 9:30 it is here in Greater Manchester, and it's been miserable again. It's been pretty woeful, pretty awful. But good morning to you anyway. And sorry I missed you yesterday. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. Hi to Philip Blair. How you doing, Philip? To Chris Brown in Durham. To Wendy Robinson. Wendy says it's pouring in Sunderland. Well, you could have knocked me down with a feather, Wendy. If it's raining here, it's bound to be raining in Sunderland, eh? The Four Jam Lions, who was watching the BBC Tory leadership debate last night. Danny Ward and Scott Davis, Martin Coombs, and Letra Blaze, 2-6 and plenty more. Right, okay. So, fun and games yesterday. As I sit here now, the smell of asphalt is still very strong around Richie Allen Show Towers. Very strong smell of asphalt. Had the entire ground floor relaid yesterday because it wasn't even. It was so uneven. If you think back to Batman and Robin from the 1960s, they often set cameras up to make it look like when Batman was fighting with Catwoman or the Joker, that the rooms were slanted. That's how bad it was downstairs. All great, all fun and games. We knew all this when we moved, before we moved. So they put asphalt down yesterday morning. The heat was phenomenal around here. And then when that cooled, they put screed down and left that to dry for a few hours. So it's just been crazy. It's been it's fun though. It's really fun. And maybe when the radio show is back on air properly tomorrow, which it will be tomorrow properly at 5, I'll tell you all about this little adventure because it's been... I'm sure other people have had this before, but it's been fun and it's been a bit mad as well. I'll tell you all about it because obviously it's no secret now that this house where we are now, and it's the first time in our lives that we ever bought someplace. I can't say bought because we don't own it, like everybody else. And it was a very hard decision for us to make because of what we know about banks and mortgages. But it became impossible to survive renting as we were for so many years and spending the bones of £1,000 a month every month on rent. We couldn't afford it. We were going to go under. So we had to find someplace nice but very affordable that needed a little bit of attention and move into it and start doing it up. And that's where we are. And I'll talk in more depth about that in the future because I know that some of my listeners might say, you went to the bank, Richie, you're a hypocrite. I am. But what do? Do you end up on the streets? You know, because nobody in this city or in any major city can get a decent 3-bedroom house to rent for anything below £900 a month, and you just can't afford that. I don't earn that sort of money. Neither does the future Mrs. Allen. So we said we're going to have to find some place and take what little savings we have, throw them at the place by way of a deposit, and then work from there and reduce our monthly rent by quite a significant amount, really. So that's where we are. And I'll talk in more detail about that in the future because it was the only way out for us. It was the only way for us to survive and for me to keep doing this programme, which, as you know, without support from listeners, it wouldn't be on the air. So I'll tell you all about it in the future, in the very near future, maybe even tomorrow. We'll talk about that process. But yeah, asphalt, screed, it's very smelly now. It's really smelly. It's really pretty awful. But the floor is fine now. And it's lovely. It's solid. It's a lovely, solid old house. And with a bit of love and attention, we'll be happy here, hopefully. So that's where we are, right? More comments were coming in there. And I do believe that somebody made a super chat donation, which I thank you very much for, by the way. Danny, thank you very much. Danny, that's lovely. Thanks very much, mate. Now, Danny, and everybody else, let me tell you this. It has been brought to my attention that Google takes 40% of every super chat donation made to anybody's stream. And I've looked into it and I believe that is the case. And I've not received any super chat donation money yet because you get it a month in arrears from Google. But I do believe that what they're doing is they're taking 40% of it. Now, Jesus, Mary and Holy Saint Joseph, if you want to send £1 or £2 or the price of a cup of coffee to the programme, do it through PayPal or the bank account details on my website. If they are charging 40%, don't send super chat donations. Look into it yourself. I've looked into it. I think they're taking 40%. I mean, that's outrageous, isn't it? That's outrageous. It's outrageous, is what it is. Philip says it's expensive. It's outrageous. But what are you going to do about it? It's their game. It is their world. It is their hegemony. I said this 1,000 times. How it was allowed, how it could be justified for Google to buy YouTube. The power and the dominance that it gives that one company, that one corporation. It's shocking. There is nowhere else for people to be other than on Google and YouTube and Facebook. But look, I'm not going to get into that now. Philip says he saw a $500 super chat donation at another channel. That'll be nearly halved. 40% of that will go to Google. It's shocking. Now, I watched 25 minutes of the Conservative Party leadership debate on the BBC last night. The debate. There was one on Channel 4, wasn't there? There was one on Channel 4. There they are. Hey? See that? Those are the participants. So Dominic Raab dropped out yesterday, the former Brexit secretary. In yesterday's round of voting, he came short of the required 33 THs. So there you have Johnson, you have Jeremy Hunt, you have Michael Gove, Sajid Javid, the Home Secretary, and the International Development Secretary Rory Stewart. And the host was Emily Maitlis. More on Emily Maitlis in a couple of minutes' time. So there you go. There they were. Do you want to watch a little bit of it? The magic of YouTube live streaming. You don't want to watch a bit of it, do you? But I'm going to play you a bit anyway and turn my microphone down. Is what I'm going to do. Here we go.
Jeremy is saying
You are
happy
with no
Brexit.
No.
Can you just raise your hand if there is a guarantee to leave by October 31st?
When I played this earlier
Just raise your
on,
hand.
there's no point running this.
So I would agree with you.
I told you, Car Crash TV, the worst production values
must come
in
out
the world.
on the 31st
There
of October.
was nothing
most
really to write
important
home
thing is
about.
to win
Right,
for
so we'll get rid
Britain,
of that.
and that
You
means
should be able to
getting
hear
out.
that.
If there was a prospect that we were nearly there.
Anyway, I'll figure it out. Or I won't. So, needless to say, this debate on the BBC last night was... I don't know what that was, you see. There you go again. That's 5 mistakes so far, and we're not even 8 minutes into the broadcast. Right. Let's have a look at the papers, and the papers, unsurprisingly, are dominated by the debate. The debate. Here's The Guardian. Johnson defensive and evasive, but remains favourite for number 10. So, depending on which side of the political spectrum the newspaper is, The Guardian, it's a lefty newspaper, it says that Johnson was evasive and defensive, but on the more conservative-leaning newspapers today, or in the more conservative-leaning newspapers, there is praise for Johnson's performance. That's The Guardian. It's everywhere today, this. It's everywhere. Get rid of The Guardian. Go to the free newspaper, The Metro. Bun fight as Boris leaves bunker. So much was made of the fact that Johnson didn't participate in Sunday evening's Channel 4 debate, but did turn up yesterday. Some commentators are predicting that the final two, and we will know the final two later this week, probably tomorrow, will be Rory Stewart and Boris Johnson, because Stewart is more of a centrist and he's a Remainer, is Stewart. So there you go. That's in the Metro. In the Daily Mirror, our next PM, what a joke. The debate's been called a shambles by the Daily Mirror. And quite a number of newspaper columnists have referred to, have not been kind to Emily Maitlis, the presenter, who also is one of the Newsnight presenters. Newsnight is a BBC Two. It's one of the BBC's biggest. It's a flagship news programme for the BBC. It comes on at 10:30 every evening on BBC Two, just after the news on BBC One. So it's more analytical. It takes a more in-depth, allegedly, look at some of the stories. It's now presented by 3 women. Those 3. Which is kind of strange. And we might talk more about this in a minute. You've got Kirsty Wark there. You've got Maitlis in the middle. Maitlis was the moderator last night, and Emma Barnett on the left there. So that's an anomaly. 3 women presenting Newsnight. 2 of them are Jewish. I talked about this on the radio show some weeks ago, and I brought it up again during the Twitter storm 10 days or so ago, when various UK Zionists were piling in on yours truly, trying to embarrass me. Fat chance. Trying to get me to leave Twitter. Trying to get me to commit suicide. Even fatter chance. That's not a joke, by the way. Threatening me and my family. That's not a joke either, by the way. Showing me my address and then promising to publish it. That's not a joke either, by the way. These Zionists, you know, they're not very nice people. But anyway, we'll talk more in a second about Maitlis. Maybe not so much about Maitlis. We'll focus in on old Emma Barnett there in a moment. So Maitlis is being roundly criticised by the UK media today for doing a piss poor job. Emily Maitlis is a piss poor presenter. Full stop. How misogynistic of you. No, it's right across the board at the BBC. Incompetent presenters. Whether it's Nick Robinson, whether it's John Humphrey. Incompetent, useless, incapable of doing their job. But increasingly, gender pay gap issues, hashtag Me Too and all that. Women are being pushed into very high profile roles, front and centre, and not because they're any good. But also not just because they're women. And we'll come to that in a minute. This is where I get accused of being anti-Semitic again, but I couldn't give an arse. I couldn't give a rat's arse, to put it mildly. Right, so that was the Mirror at the Times. Tory leadership rivals raise heat on Johnson. Corbyn to back second referendum. Now, that's a story that's in all the papers today. Jeremy Corbyn will today capitulate to the rotund little goon Tom Watson and say, yes, we back a second referendum. Good old Jeremy. Good old Jeremy. Nice and predictable. Do you remember the abuse that this programme took when Jeremy was elected the leader of the Labour Party? Do you remember? Even when my old friend David Icke was saying they're piling in on Jeremy Corbyn because he must have something interesting to say. And I said, no, David, he doesn't. He's got nothing interesting to say. He's got nothing of any interest to say to me or you. He used to have, back in the backbench days. Corbyn has been totally predictable in how he has collapsed in the face of pressure from centre-left Blairites in his own party and the rabid Zionist lobby in the UK. He collapsed like a house made of straw faced by a big bad wolf. He just collapsed, Jeremy. Nothing to say. God, I don't like being right. I'm not right very often, but on Corby. Daily Express. Free £1 bet at Ascot today for you if you buy the Express. It's Brexit or catastrophe. No clear winner in the debate. Johnson picks team to take power. Looks like he's a shoo-in. Again, nothing new there. The iPaper. Tory rivals can't knock Johnson off his perch. This is more honest. I've read this morning. This is more honest. They're all a bunch of goons and morons, obviously. I mean, look at them. Look at who they are and what they represent. You know? So when lefties and progressive types and momentum lovers go bananas when I abuse Corbyn, abuse him very well, Okay, I go over the top with Corbyn, of course I do. So when I get criticised for that, naturally it's whataboutery. So you must be in favour of these goons here. How could I be? How could I support or wish those morons on the country? Far from it. My shtick has been for years. We can't ever, we will never move forward as a civilization, as a species, if we go to the polls every 4 or 5 years and believe that it's all going to be different if we pick one of the candidates that the establishment or the elite has put in front of us. They all play for the same team, whether they realise it or not. So nobody supports any of these people. Well, I certainly don't anyway. But I have to keep apologising for that. The Boris and Rory show. So the Telegraph alleges that it's going to come down to the two of them. International Development Secretary Rory Stewart and Boris Johnson. And that's it really on the front page of the Telegraph newspaper. Let's get rid of that. Car crash telly at its best. The royal family has introduced a new sport to its members. See how many fucking people you can knock down or crash into in a year as a family. Because you had dozy bastard Prince Philip, psychopath, definitely implicated in the death of Princess Diana, driving from a side road onto a motorway and nearly killing a woman in his Range Rover, and then driving the following day. Then you had the Duke of Kent. He's the baldy arsehole who gives the trophy at Wimbledon, doesn't he? They hand out the trophies and they say hello to the ball boys. Awful looking guy. He nearly killed somebody the other day. Now William and Kate knocked an old woman down. Well, they didn't do it themselves, but one of their outriders did. Knocked old Irene down. Knocked her down. 83, knocked down by a policeman on a bike. So it's a new sport for the Royals. Polo is boring the shit out of them. Let's see how many people we can bump off in our cars and then just walk away from it scot-free. Exclusive, widow critical. Of course she's critical. She was hit by a fucking police bike. Jesus Christ. That's the monetisation gone from this video. Right there. You swear yourself into poverty, Richie. Daily Mail, grandma, age 83, hit by Wills and Kate Convoy. Seriously ill in hospital. They sent her flowers. There you are, love. Here's a bunch of daisies for you. You'll be alright when you come round. She only needs to have her hips done. Oh, Jesus Christ. The Daily Star. Kyle the Coward. Jeremy Kyle. Shock jock. Not a shock jock, really. He won't face MPs. Members of Parliament have to justify their existence and pay themselves extra money on top of their annual salary. And they do this by forming committees and serving on them. And you and me get stiffed. And what MPs wanted to do was, because the guests on this pretty awful programme, the Jeremy Kyle Show, have not been treated properly, were exposed on television, were ridiculed, and then left to fend for themselves later on, and given no real, help with what they might face having exposed themselves on national television. Some of them became seriously ill. Not a good thing, right? So MPs want to get Jeremy Kyle in and grill him and virtue signal about what a bastard he is, while charging me and you a fortune for doing it. Fuck off. We know that show is garbage. We know that the guests were exploited. We know this. You don't need to give yourselves a load of money and ask questions of Jeremy Kyle. So good man, Jeremy Kyle. Good for you, son. So Emily Maitlis. I'll read a few comments and we'll move on then. It's coming up for 10 to 10. I've nothing else to do today. Well, I have plenty to do today around the house, but as my new internet won't be switched on until tomorrow morning, there's very little else I can do today. I can't download anything. And by the middle of the day, streaming is going to be an impossibility. We saw this on Monday, so I apologise again for that. Let's go back to the comments. There were plenty of them. My website is richieallen.co.uk. It's RICHIEALLEN at hotmail.co.uk. Hi to Patrick Vidine. How you, Patrick? Let me go on down there. Hi to Nick Farrell. How you doing, Nick? Thanks for watching, mate. And to Scottish Bull 80. How you doing? Who says catching this show has made his day. Come on. This is crap. There's not a scale to even measure this. This is proper crap. Chris Morell. How you doing, Chris? Let's go on down. There's a lot of them. And then Scottish Bull says, what a shit show as usual. Love the stream. Thank you, my friend. That's more like it. Hi to Nobleness D. How you doing, D? From the east coast of Canada. Thanks for coming in this morning. Byron Raver, David O'Connor. Anyone else think that Gove looks like Mr. Bean? Michael Gove. He looks more like Penfold, David, from Danger Mouse, no? It's just me. Hi to Simon M. How you doing, Simon? Thank you, Simon. Mark Richards. Nicky Campbell on Twitter. What did Nicky Campbell say? I'll check that out later on. Danny Warden again. Danny. Matthew Null. Matthew retracted his message. Hi to Atlanta Bill. You're looking well, Richie. Thank you, Atlanta Bill. I feel well. I don't know whether it's the beard or the camera angle. Yeah, it's probably both. The makeup. It's the makeup. Mega Tree Rats as well. Hi to Cocabello's getting ready to head off out. Good stuff. While it's not raining. And I'm going to leave the comments there now for a while. Twisted Hippie as well. Sean Mack. I said Gabriel Swift, didn't I? I'd like to say hello to everybody. Lord Bransty as well. Kelly Reid. Eloise Mack. How you doing, Eloise? Sharon Gale is on there as well somewhere this morning. How you doing, Sharon? Good stuff there. Jason Hurley. I said Eloise. Well, I've got to stop. Michelle Marr. Michelle says, can't believe I'm getting Richie live. ASIO must be getting slack. Good stuff. Letra Blaze says, I live in Manchester, so every bald bastard I see, I think it's Richie. Well, you can. I'll tell you how you can filter them out. I'm 6'6" tall. I am 6'6" tall, and it's all in proportion, ladies. So there you go. Right. So I've said hello to nearly everybody. Where were we then? This self-censorship is a dangerous thing, so we must never self-censor. We also must never bully. Now, I mean that. I know the word bullying is being hijacked by the progressive left, and they want to accuse everybody of bullying everybody. But I want to dwell on this whole thing about Emily Maitlis and Emma Barnett and the disproportionate representation of Jewish men and women, not only in the media here in the UK, but in the media in general. And it's not my research, you know this. People like Paul Craig Roberts, going back years, has been looking at it. You know, fantastic article in the Times of Israel some years ago by Manny Friedman. Obviously Manny is Jewish. And Manny said, look, we've got to stop apologising for our success in the media. We do control the media, Manny Friedman said. This is all true. Go to gilad.co.uk. Gilad saved the article. It's since been deleted because it was brutally honest. And I suppose the Zionist lobby in the UK and in the US probably thought it's a dangerous article. Manny wrote very honestly about how successful Jewish businessmen and women have become in the media. Of course, he didn't get into why that is, nor did he understand that many Jewish people, whether it be news presenters, whether it be producers, they're honest to God, decent people, well-meaning people. They're not aware of it. You know, they're not part of any agenda to put Jewish people into key positions, front of camera and in production. And that's a hard concept for people to grasp. I'm saying that Emily Maitlis, Robert Peston, Laura Kunzberg, Nick Robinson, I could be here all day, Emma Barnett. I'm saying they're not aware of this because their Jewishness probably doesn't define them. But there are others at work to make sure that there is a very healthy proportion of people born into Jewish families or people who identify as Jewish working in the media. Now, when you say that, of course, the siren sounds, doesn't it? This is anti-Semitism. This is a deep-seated revulsion of, or suspicion of, or hatred of Jewish folks, which is just nonsense. I put this very question to Rabbi Aaron Cohen on the programme the other night, and he disagreed with me. It was lovely. I said to him, there are far more Jews in the media, proportionally, than there are Jews in society. I said, there's something going on there. And the rabbi said, no, there's not, Richie. Fair enough, right? Again, because Jewish people, it's not a Jewish people thing. It's a darker thing. And the odds, number one, of getting 3 women to present Newsnight, one of the BBC's flagship news programmes, the odds of that happening, 3 women, are astronomical. Right? They're astronomical. It could only happen if it were engineered to be that way. Right? Now, if I said to you, 3 women presenting a flagship news programme, and 2 of them, the 2 on the left, would be Jewish women, the odds against that are even more astronomical. They are beyond astronomical. Again, it could only happen by design. And if I told you that one of the presenters had very serious skeletons in her closet, skeletons that would be a barrier to anybody else advancing within the BBC at the rate of knots. If I told you that one of the Jewish women had a cemetery worth of skeletons in her closet, skeletons again that would make it virtually impossible for me or other, I'm going to say it, other non-Jewish people or other non-ethnic minority people, those odds unbelievably astronomical. And I want to talk a little bit about this because it's important. We never forget this. I'm going to leave that there on screen. And I talked about this. Maitlis was hammered for her performance last night, not able to control the panellists, and it descended into a rabble. A more experienced presenter, like Kirsty Wark, who's been around for years, should have got the gig. A more experienced presenter like David Dimbleby, I know he's not on Question Time anymore, should have gotten the gig. But he gave it to Emily Maitlis. I know she's been around a while, but she's not very good. Descended into nonsense and silliness. Now, I did a monologue on the radio show about the high number of Jewish people in very senior media roles. Front of camera, backstage, in production. I mentioned them. There's loads of them. Kunsberg, Robinson, Robert Peston, Maitlis, obviously I mentioned. There are many of them. I did a list. I don't have the list to hand, but I read a list out one night on the show about 3 weeks ago. And it shocked a lot of people. Because, again, when you think of the percentage of Jewish folks in the population, and then you see the percentage of Jewish folks in the top roles, it's mind-boggling. It can't be explained away with, well, culturally, they're very good. They're very good at, they're very good at broadcasting. They are very good presenters. They are very good on television. They come across very well on TV. You can't explain it away with that. And Emma Barnett, it's a really interesting story. This woman here. Very, very interesting indeed. This is really, really interesting. It's worth bringing this up again. This woman had her very exclusive and very private and very posh education funded by her parents, who were, I can't really say it any other way, were pimps and ran brothels up here in the northwest. Massive brothels, for which they were eventually convicted and for which her father, Ian, went to prison. Now, that's not a skeleton in a closet, that's a graveyard in a closet. Her entry into very expensive education and then into university and into the BBC was funded by human trafficking and prostitution and by a father who referred to the women he pimped as his whores. Ian Barnett. So human trafficking, prostitution, paved the way for Emma Barnett. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that's incredibly unfair. That is lousy. It's cheap. And it is not the conduct becoming of somebody who declares himself to be a real journalist. But you're wrong. It's very important. My point is, regardless of whether or not Emma Barnett played any part in her dad's business, and we don't know whether she did or not, we do know that she was aware of it. How does anybody with those skeletons get to the top of the BBC in record-breaking time? And remember, and I know some of my female listeners will begin to wonder. They'll begin to wonder. Has Richie got something against women? Emma Barnett is woeful. She is absolutely criminally incompetent as a broadcaster. This is the woman who got all snotty with Jeremy Corbyn on Radio 5 before the last election because he didn't have a couple of key figures to hand. And then she deputised for Andrew Marr on the Marr Show one Sunday morning, which again was inexplicable that she would be given that. It's not the done thing. I've worked at pretty much every level of commercial media. It is not the done thing for somebody as inexperienced as that to be given the keys to the kingdom. You sit on the Marr Show this morning, Emma. It doesn't happen. And she was roundly ridiculed for that performance, for being very rude to Barry Gardner. Now, I'd struggle not to be rude to Barry Gardner, to be honest. The shadow international trade secretary, is he? Gardner's an arse, right? But she wasn't robustly examining him. She was just being rude and obnoxious and snotty. It's what she does. And then, a few months ago, covered it on the Richie Allen radio show extensively, she did one of the worst interviews I have ever heard by a professional broadcaster with the former Brexit Secretary David Davis. You've got to remember this. David Davis breezed into the studio and Barnett came off like Homer Simpson. She was asking Davis who's to blame for May's, seeming capitulation to Europe, because Davis was sticking to his guns that Theresa May had basically given in. She'd given up too much too soon without getting reciprocation from Brussels. And Barnett said, well, what's going on? And David Davis explained in a way that Forrest effing Gump would have understood it, that Ollie Robbins and Brexit supporting civil servants had hijacked the whole department. He couldn't have made it clearer. And Barnett didn't understand it and kept asking him again, could he tell her exactly who was responsible? I could imagine producers screaming in her earpiece, just listen to him, you cloth-eared bint, listen to him. She is rubbish. Beyond rubbish. She's just a snotty, sneery little whatever that I suppose suits what it is the BBC wants to do. And what's really interesting about Emma Barnett, some of my listeners will remember a guy called Philip Cross. I think Philip Cross was unearthed by George Galloway and by Craig Murray. And Cross is an elite creation. He is a man working for Rupert Murdoch who was employed to edit the Facebook accounts of certain people. And by editing them, taking away from their Wikipedia accounts. What's wrong with me? Philip Cross was charged with the responsibility of editing the Wikipedia pages of certain people to remove things from their pages that were embarrassing for them or that might impact on their careers and on their progress. You remember this? Galloway and Craig Murray went after this guy. And this guy, Philip Cross, was repeatedly last year deleting information about Emma Barnett's parents. And also constantly deleting a reference to emails sent by Mr. Barnett to his daughter Emma when she was at college, talking about his, quote, whores, end quote. Now, he didn't succeed, this guy Cross. He succeeded for a while. But there is some reference now on Wikipedia to Barnett's parents. But for quite a while, this was being deliberately airbrushed by this guy, Philip Cross. Why? 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 Referencing his whores in an email to his daughter, who feigned surprise at university when they were arrested and charged. And she's one of the 3 women team that presents Newsnight Monday to Friday on BBC Two. It's absolutely extraordinary, is what it is. But you know, it's the old Leslie Nielsen thing, isn't it? Nothing to see here, please disperse, nothing to see here. Nobody with that background would have gotten anywhere near a live radio programme on BBC Radio 5 Live, let alone presenting the Andrew Marr Show. Maybe it's just me. So there you go. Right. Have I lost the Sorry about this. That's what you call dead air when I don't say anything. I saw a comment there and now I can't find it. Oh well. Right, a couple of more stories worth looking into this morning. We'll do an extended paper review this morning on account of the problems with the live stream for the radio. This is very interesting. It's in all the newspapers today. There's a crisis of confidence in vaccines in parts of Europe. This is in The Guardian. It's a global survey of attitudes towards vaccines, and it has revealed the scale of the crisis. And it shows that only 59% of people in Western Europe and 50% in the East think vaccines are safe, compared with 79% worldwide. This is in The Guardian, right? They have a chart there as well. They have a very helpful chart there, which talks about the countries where there is a more healthy attitude to vaccination, don't you know? Because it's not healthy to be sceptical of vaccine efficacy, nor is it healthy to question their safety, according to The Guardian. But it's not just in The Guardian, this is everywhere. Here's the Telegraph. How France, home of the Enlightenment allegedly, became the vaccine skeptic capital of the world. And this alleges that people in France are more sceptical than anywhere else. Again, it's the same survey of 140 countries. The Wellcome Trust and Gallup found richer countries are considerably less likely to trust vaccines than people in developing ones. So people in richer countries are less likely to trust vaccines than people in developing ones. Maybe, just maybe, it's because people in countries that are doing better might have more access to a more broad and a more diverse range of news sources. Maybe. And of course that is the case. And the World Health Organization is saying today that this is terrifying and that we need to look again at social media. Because it is social media, apparently, that is causing this drop in confidence around the world, or in richer countries anyway, for vaccine safety. I would contend that stories coming out of Ireland, we could talk about Ireland, it's not just Ireland, there are other countries where girls have been injured by the HPV, human papillomavirus, the Gardasil vaccine, and I can't even say allegedly injured. You know, you might say any decent journalist would say allegedly. It isn't allegedly. I've seen it. I've met some of the girls. I've spoken to them and their families. seriously injured by Gardasil. And I think that coming to light, and again, the easier access that people in more developed countries have to social media is probably one of the reasons why there's less confidence. So very interesting. But watch how this is used, this particular story, in the coming weeks and months, because there are going to be calls very soon for mandatory vaccinations, for legislation in this country, for a bill in this country to mandate vaccines for children, and all of that herd immunity nonsense. So that's in the Telegraph today. Let's get rid of those. And move on. What else have we got for you? We have climate change. So the Greta Thunberg and Extinction Rebellion move. You saw the Extinction Rebellion. You'll be aware of this, of course. It's not so long ago, causing traffic chaos in London, costing businesses millions of pounds in revenue. And according to The Guardian today, a new survey shows that 2/3 of people in this country want faster action on climate. And they are attributing this to, again, Greta Thunberg and also Extinction Rebellion. So it seems that it worked, because now they're surveying people and they want things done. And they want things done quickly. Stories in the Guardian today. You can read that for free at theguardian.com. Again, we've covered this extensively, so I won't dwell too much on it. But they're scaring the absolute bejesus out of people. They're taking over streets, causing chaos, worrying people with it. Then they're waiting a few weeks and they're doing a survey and they're getting the results they want. That it's having an impact on people. Rather than question, what's this really all about? Can a 1.5 degree change in the next 20 years really cause chaos on Earth? The answer is no. It's nonsense. But rather than look to the junk science, people will fall for the scaremongering, of course, because they're exposed to it on TV 24/7. And then when they're asked about it, oh yeah, we want action now. We want action yesterday, is what they're saying. That's in The Guardian today. What about RT.com? I thought this was a gag. But Donald Trump is so crazy, of course, it isn't a gag. Joe Biden said he'd cure cancer, didn't he? In a campaign manifesto promise at a rally. That's former US Vice President, of course. So Donald Trump has apparently vowed to cure cancer and AIDS and go to Mars in his second term. But RT is being a bit cheeky with the headline. I think the Donald said that in his second term they would pave the way for somebody going to Mars, which is of course a completely different thing than promising that you'll put a person or persons on Mars.